Check one, check. Whoa. Check one, check two. Can anybody hear me? Give me a sign in the chat, please. Last night I did a stream and, well, I started with no sound, so that wasn't a good start at all. Loud and clear. Well, that's good. The mic's not even close. Hello, everybody. So, actually, the stream I did last night was the first stream I've ever done, and I watched it back. Hello, JR Music. Hello, Adamski A. Hello, Helix Holmes. Yeah, I watched the stream back that I did last night, and I realized two things. First of all, I was speaking way too fast. I think that's some kind of nervousness. I was like, I even struggled to keep up, and I'm the one who was speaking. And the second thing that I noticed was that it's more that there are particular points that I would like to give more focus and more clarity. So that's what today is about. Hello. Okay, so we're here to talk about, well, two things. One is the 30,000 hours and what I've learned. And the other thing is the membership idea that I keep banging on about, because these two things are very, very intrinsically linked. Is intrinsically the right word? I'm not sure. Oh, yes. The other thing from yesterday is I did not interact very well with the chat, and I accidentally didn't save the chat, because you have to specify that when you set up the stream in the first place. So yeah, a few little mistakes to overcome. But if I'm definitely gonna pay a bit more attention to that now. I think it would have helped me to keep my pace good if I had paid more attention to the chat. So that's my intention this time around. Take a few minutes to get warmed up before we get into the meat of the things. But by all means, hit the chat and ask questions, leave comments, and that will get us started. I'm going to quickly send out an email as well to let people know that we're live. Okay, that's done. So let me look into the chat. What synth is that, pal? Pad mastery is something I want. Okay. Wow. Isn't that a native Cubase synth? No. Actually, this is one of my favorite synths. This is Synapse Audio June 3, which is focused on sawtooths, doing the super saw kind of sound like a Roland JP8000, which I don't even use the Roland JP8000 anymore since I like June so much. Have I ever used Harman for resynthesis? Yes. Nice surprise for a Friday evening. Great. Very 90s vibe to it. Yeah, it's because of the way I programmed it. That's my taste. Do I still recommend Stereo Touch for use on pianos? Yes. But it's not a blanket recommendation. That is something that can work. It doesn't necessarily always work. In fact, it often doesn't work. So if you do it and you don't like it, don't use it. But if you do it and you like it, use it. I know it sounds a bit lame, but I have a longer, more complicated answer to that question, a more accurate answer to that question, but it's a bit too much for now. So yeah, just a couple more minutes and I'm going to get straight into business. Yeah, so I've had a lot of messages over the last few days, or actually the last week, on YouTube and also email. Have I ever used SideMinder? No. So the emails that I'm getting about this and messages I'm getting about this membership idea. So just to recap on that, I've had the idea to open a private membership site, I suppose is what you'd call it. But I think of it more as a service than a site. So it would include a site, but it would also be a service. And what a lot of, well, the feedback's been very positive generally, but there's still a few people who aren't quite getting it. So I'm gonna clarify on that today, this evening. And one of the things a few people have said, and it's a small minority, I must say, but what I'm hearing is, oh well, there's already such and such service, and there's already, certain other services, but the services that are being suggested, they're not like what I have in mind at all. And I want to make the point very clear that what I have in mind is, in my opinion, in my view, the way I envision it, it's radically different from anything else that's out there. So I wonder, what have you guys done? Hello, Chris Smout. What have you guys done in pursuit of learning music production? And in fact, I say music production, but really any aspect of music making, whether that be sound design and synthesis, it might be composition and songwriting, it might be mixing, mix downs, mastering. What avenues have you tried? Have you been on university courses? Have you done online training? Have you done mentoring? Have you been on YouTube? I guess you've been on YouTube. Have you subscribed to magazines maybe? What have you tried? Discord servers? Yeah, YouTube. I'm not going to mention any brands. I see the brand names in the comment, but I don't want to say those out loud. I don't know. It feels. I didn't know about that, Adamski. Actually, I was. There's a school that teaches general recording practices, we'll say, that certainly back then was very well known, very popular. But one of the issues that I found growing up and learning about music production was, in the early days especially, there was a big focus on guitar music. So everything was about live drums and guitars and, you know, the classic 4 or 5 piece pop or pop rock setup of the time. And I found that very frustrating. In fact, I even remember in the magazines, they used to print out like EQ guides where you have like, you've probably seen them, the spectrum, and it will show, oh, boost in this area to get more punch on your kick drum and boosted this area to get more sizzle in the piano and that kind of thing. But all of it was like acoustic guitar is treated this way and electric guitar is treated that way, and then your bass is treated this way. And you knew when they said bass, they actually meant electric bass, and that was pretty much it. And it would be, you know, boost 1K on snares. Hello to John Brown. I'd like to know how to make a Jamaican drum sound from scratch. Ooh, what does from scratch mean? Different people have different definitions on what from scratch actually means. Are you talking about just in software? Or you want to start skinning some animals and hitting them? I mean, what does from scratch mean? Chris Smout says magazines, but they were super hit and miss. Some interviews were very helpful and others less so. Yeah, I would say that magazines, in my experience, have been one of the better sources of information, as long as you choose the right mags, simply for the fact that they have quite a high bar for, they have quite a high integrity for the information that goes in it. I mean, the actual staff that work at the magazine, not necessarily the artists that they interview, that's a separate issue. But certainly they will try to make sure that what they're putting out is factually accurate and is scientifically sound and is well explained. So I did actually find the magazines helpful for certain fundamental basics, but it was still a struggle to learn from those magazines. It was a very slow process. I kind of learned the lingo from magazines, I would say, and manuals as well. But yeah, when you want exceptional results, you need more than just a bit of lingo and the basics. You need, yeah, something special, which is what we're here to talk about. I remember that, Chris. John Brown says life would be lifeless without music. That's an interesting way to put it. Yeah. Somebody said to me on YouTube, left a comment. It was a really sweet comment because I had said in my video that, you know, I live for music and I'm just a studio hermit and all I care about is making my music sound better and learning new ways to improve everything. And he wrote this sweet comment saying, Owen, don't forget to look after your ears, you know, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And yeah, I found that amusing. I mean, sweet. I appreciate the sentiment, but I do look after my ears very well. And I don't have all my eggs in one basket quite in the way that he probably imagined. So, yeah, I have some notes to help me along. And I'm going to refer to the notes on and off, but also refer to the chat and talk to you about what's in my notes so that we can get some feedback going. That was something that I see that I could improve on from last night's stream. So what do we want? What are we here for? You know, we want to make powerful music, whatever that means. So my idea of powerful music and your idea of powerful music could be very different. And in fact, your idea or my idea of powerful music might be different tomorrow than what it was yesterday. That's an interesting thing. So for me, as an engineer, my focus in that role is always to make sure that I'm hitting the targets of the artist that I'm supporting, that I'm servicing. So a fundamental truth is that we all hear and feel music differently. In fact, have you ever had the experience? Tell me in the chat. Have you ever had the experience where someone plays you a song and they're just all about that song? They're like, "Oh, well, check out this. Wait till you hear this," and they play it and they're like so excited, and you just don't feel it. Like you don't get it. You're like, it's all right, it's okay, or it's like it's a bit boring or whatever. But then later you hear the same piece of music and you're like, oh wow, I don't know why I didn't hear it the first time, but now I get it. Now it makes total sense. Someone mentioned drum and bass record. Yeah, again, I don't want to name names of things live, but that particular record's an interesting record. It was a popular standout record. In fact, something that I've noticed is that when you look in any scene, any genre, the biggest tracks aren't very average, if you see what I mean. All of them stand out in one way or another. Most of them have something rather unusual about them. Have you ever noticed that? If you think of the biggest track in a genre, it isn't necessarily typical of that track. In fact, a lot of the kind of big influential tracks or very popular tracks in a given scene are tracks that people debate whether that track even belongs in that genre. Is it really a true drum and bass track or whatever? Because it's a bit different from everything else. And that can go two ways. Either that track kind of stands on its own. I can certainly think of some examples in that world, jungle drum and bass, of tracks that are just really odd tracks that aren't really quite like the others, but they're really popular, big tracks. And they kind of stand on their own, as they don't really sound like everything else. And if you were to make a track and make it similar to that, then it would be obvious that you were copying from that classic, yet they work in the context. There's that type of classic, but then the other type of classic is the one that comes along and changes the game, where everybody kind of copies what that track does. That only when playing their own songs, it's all in the context of presentation. Oh, yes. The standout tracks usually make their own genres. Yeah, that happens too. So where was I going with this? Powerful music. Yeah, the definition of what you call powerful music, that's a very personal thing. And it can change from time to time. The reason why I mention this now, why I'm talking about this, is because if I say to you, I'm going to help you make powerful music, your first question should be, well, what do you mean by powerful music? And my answer is always, well, what do you want it to mean? You let me know what you want it to mean, and we'll go from there. So that's my skill set. My skill set is being flexible and adaptable in order to be able to satisfy that, so that I can meet other people's values for their music projects rather than just my own, which is mad because I have to kind of adopt their values during a studio session in order to do what I do and do it well. Even if just obviously temporarily, but that has given me this strange, it's had a strange side effect. So I've been doing that since about 2001. Yeah, 2001, I started working in a local studio, and we would have DJ type artists come to the studio, and yeah, it would be my job to kind of get into their head, understand their taste, understand their preferences, and understand their goals for the music. And very, very specifically, I have to understand exactly what it is they like, exactly what it is they're going after, and the opposite side of that, everything they don't want and everything dislike and they're not going after. So we were very, very clear on what I needed to bring to the table, rather than what some studio engineers would do is just they have their sound and it's set in stone, and people come to them because they want that particular sound, and that's the only sound that that engineer can do. I never wanted to be like that. In fact, before I became a studio engineer, I was afraid to book a studio to have tracks engineered because I was worried that the studio engineer wouldn't listen to what my definition of what a powerful track should be, or they wouldn't understand how to fulfill on that, even if I could communicate it to them. So I want to make it crystal clear when I say we all want to make powerful music, I mean music that works for you by your definition, not by my definition. This is not about me imposing my values onto you. We all have unique values. Anyway, the problem is, whatever our values are for the music that we want to make, sometimes it feels impossible to actually achieve it. And you can feel like you've tried everything, you followed steps, you followed tutorials. Sometimes it's just not happening. And I know why. I know why that is now. That's what my experience has given me, is an understanding of why sometimes when you go to do something, you can have all the will in the world, but it feels impossible. It's just not happening. And I'm going to reveal that during this stream. Let me just check in on the chat. Someone made the point about algorithms in the music world now. People are trying to game algorithms, therefore it might happen less and less that the standout tracks are more different from the others. I tell you why. I mean, there is some validity to that. However, an interesting thing about algorithms is if you have a track that somebody really, really, really wants to listen to, and they're playing it again and again and again, like addictively, then that's a huge, what would you call it, green flag for the algorithm that's going to then want to serve that music to other people with similar taste. So if you have a track that, let's say, subverts the norms of the genre that you're working in, but the first few people who listen to that track really dig it and listen to it over and over again, then the algorithm would work in your favor. So my point there is that I'm not convinced that algorithms are necessarily a net negative in terms of the evolution of, because if you produce a product that someone really enjoys, do I call it a product? That's a bit nasty, isn't it? Calling music a product. If you produce a product that someone enjoys, but you know what I mean. I suppose it is, though. It is. If you produce music that people enjoy, then the algorithm will reward you for that. Oh, it should. Multiple Errors says it can go both ways. It can shape a genre in a new direction or alienate the audience if it's too much. Yeah, but that is normally what happens. So when you have a scene and a new track comes along that sounds different from everything else, it will alienate people, because some of those people will have their values violated. Some of those people will have their values violated, whereas the other people will have their values satisfied. And that's it. Imagine we're all walking around with like a checklist of values. And in fact, to be nuanced about it, that checklist isn't even set in stone. It changes a little bit. It shifts, it goes, it evolves over time. But either way, we each have a checklist of values. And when we hear a piece of music, that music's potential to affect us is based on how well it meets our values, or satisfies our values, I should say. M. Stromcraft says, great music should stop you in your tracks to make you want to really listen. Yeah, exactly. I agree. It goes without saying. Chris Mount says, I would settle for just being able to finish a track. Yeah. That brings us back to the struggle. And I was about to say, it's not your fault, because the answer to how to overcome those struggles, the answer of how to make powerful music won't be found in any of the places you would reasonably think to look. So what is the answer? I'm going to tell you. The answer isn't kit, right? I've seen guys waste thousands upon thousands on plugins and even more on outboard gear, only to be outdone by teenagers on laptops with headphones. I even knew a guy who spent, in fact, he was bragging to me. He was like, Owen, I was like, yeah, what's that? Guess what, man? Go on. I just spent 20 grand doing room treatment for my new studio. It's like, oh, really? How does your music sound? It must sound amazing. Yeah, well, it's like, okay, you spent 20 grand on room treatment, but your music sounds like what? Okay, well, that wasn't worth it. And again, so that person's outdone by teenagers on laptops with headphones. So it's not the equipment that you're using. I made the point, nobody has a kit problem. Nobody has a kit problem. Everybody's trying to solve the problem with kit. I must get more plugins. I must buy more equipment. But the truth is, the basic plugins in your DAW should be enough. If not, you can add the free plugins. There's loads of free plugins. If you have a decent set of free plugins and plus the default plugins inside your DAW, you have enough to get a decent sound. I'm not saying there's no benefit to having extra kit after that. Of course there is. But here's what I will say, though. If you can't get a good sound with the default plugins in your DAW, you're not going to get a good sound with better kit. That's the truth. That's the thing that the plugin sellers don't want to tell you. They don't want you thinking in that way, but it is the truth. They know that people kind of have this idea that, well, if I have better plugins, then it will be easier. And in fact, it will make it easier, but it's not enough, though. It's not a solution. I made the comparison last time. It's like if you're going to fight a boxing match and somebody offers you better boxing gloves. Well, that's fine. It's going to help, but it's not going to solve the problem. If you don't know how to fight, the better boxing gloves, they're irrelevant. You see what I'm saying? And that's the same situation with improving your kit. Okay, once you can fight, then the better boxing gloves is going to give you an edge. Then it has power. And it's the same with kit, with plugins. Once you know how to use the basics and get a good sound, that's when it becomes useful. That's when it becomes powerful to have better kit. I suppose there are exceptions to that principle, but generally. Okay, the answer also is not to put more time and effort into each track. Who hasn't tried that? Who hasn't tried, right, this time I'm definitely going to do it. I'm going to make the best track I've ever done. I'm determined. Right, let's do it. And half an hour later, you're like, oh, I can't do anything. I suck. Everybody tries it. Nearly nobody succeeds. And the best tracks often required the least amount of effort, the least amount of work, and the least amount of time. Ask anybody. I have had the pleasure of speaking with some very successful producers, songwriters in the pop world, in various dance genres, in a few different countries, in fact. And they all say the same thing when I quiz them. And I do quiz them. I give them a hard time. I say, how did you come up with the idea for that? How long did you spend on this? And the answer is always the same. The best tracks are the ones that are the easiest and the quickest to make. And I know why that is as well. And I'm going to get to that too. So if it's not about the kit and it's not about the time and effort you put into it, then what is it about? I used to think that it comes down to natural talent, which I clearly didn't have it. My piano teacher saw me as a lost cause. I didn't even complete grade 1. My guitar teacher asked my parents not to send me to lessons. And besides that, my earliest productions had sloppy timing, parts out of key, and a muffled overall sound, which is really annoying because everybody has met someone who, when you listen to their music, you think, wow, that's really good. And you ask them, well, what did you use or how long have you been doing it? And it's like, oh, yeah, I've just been doing it 6 months and did it on my laptop. Did it with a free DAW or something. And you think, how is that possible? Can we check the chat? It's tough when you've got a job, wife, kids, etc. It's a product of your imagination. You produce music. Piece of art for public or personal consumption. Wow. Okay. Chris Smout says, preach. I'm sitting in the middle of a hardware mess and I hardly ever use it. I know a lot of people like that. I do. I know a lot of people who kind of went down the rabbit hole of, oh, I'll just buy a few modular rack, what do you call them, modular modules. Good luck with that. Once you pop, you can't stop, You buy 3, you need 4. You buy 4, you need 5. That's how that goes. And you could be years down the line and you can't get a good sound out of the thing because it's overwhelming. In fact, all the choice with when you have lots of kit, the choice can actually be a disadvantage to your workflow. So, for example, if you think I'm not getting good results out of this EQ, maybe I'll try another one. How many times? Because if you've been playing that game for a while, if every week or every fortnight, every month you buy a new EQ, by the end of the year you have dozens of EQs. So what do you do when you need to pick one? Are you going to try every single one by one? That doesn't make sense. Or are you going to figure it out in your head each time and think and go through the list mentally of all the different ones you have and try to pick which one's going to be the best one? That doesn't make sense. That's not good for workflow. If you have to make decisions by going through a million options every time you need to make a decision, you can't keep the momentum up to stay in a good creative state. And you can't focus properly on the things that really matter and pay attention to what's happening with the sound if you're, mixing or something. On the subject of being outdone by kids on cheaper kit, would you say that's from technical knowledge or musical ability? Neither. I'm glad you asked. I'm about to explain. I know why the kids are outdoing the kids on laptops and headphones are outdoing the guys with loads of equipment and who've put loads of time into it and put loads of effort into it. I know why there's that discrepancy, and it's not a general rule. Obviously, those kids with the laptops and the headphones who do really well are outliers. But I know why, and I'm going to get to that. So I once asked my father for advice because this is when I was very young. I started music production in 1994 when I was 10 years old. So yeah, it goes back, and I was very serious about it at 10 years old. By the way, I wasn't just dabbling. I had fantasized about it before I started. This is how I ended up getting 30,000 plus hours in, is because I started very, very young. And by the time I was 17, I was working in a local studio. So that's the reason I managed to get so many hours in. But anyway, when I was young, I asked my dad for advice because I said, look, I'm trying to make music with this technology and it should do what I want it to do, but I'm not getting the results I want. Everything I make is bad. It's rubbish. For some reason, I expected that if I had the equipment, I could just sit down and with a bit of patience and persistence, I'd come out with some decent music. It seems a reasonable enough expectation, but it was really bad. I mean, it was awful. And so I went to my dad and I said, well, what do you think I should do? My dad's a good problem solver, you know. He used to be a computer programmer, and that's kind of his way of thinking, is a problem solving way of thinking. And he said to me that, and he's a music lover as well, and followed jazz music. He plays jazz guitar. Anyway, he told me that he's noticed that most artists throughout their whole careers, they have one or two good songs, if they're lucky, and that's it. That's their lot. Everything else they do is rubbish. Dross, he'd say. That's his favorite word, dross. Utter dross. So, but he said then there are artists who they manage to keep coming back with something good. Like year after year, decade after decade, they continue to do well and to produce amazing work. And you can see that artistic progression where they actually improve over time. That doesn't happen typically. And he's right. My dad's right about that. It doesn't happen typically. In fact, in the dance music world, one of the things that I find odd in some of the big scenes is that you have these kind of, I don't want to be disrespectful actually, but you have these figures who've been in the scene a long time. They do deserve respect, don't get me wrong. They do deserve respect, and they are revered as DJs and producers typically. Please don't take this the wrong way. I'm not being disrespectful to these guys at all. But if you were to watch an interview with them, the interviewer is interested in what were you doing 20, 30 years ago? There's a reason for that, because that's when they produced their music that changed the game. A lot of them. I mean, that's a typical pattern where they come onto the scene and they make this amazing music that wows everybody. That kind of elevates them to legendary status. And then 10, 20, 30 years down the line, they still have that status, but they haven't actually continued to produce music that has the same impact. It might be great music, don't get me wrong. It might be just as good as the music was, but it doesn't have the same impact. It's not quite as innovative. And I think that people have this idea that somehow that's related to youth, like you have to be young to be an innovator, or you have to be young to be popular. That's nonsense. It has nothing to do with that, in my opinion. It has to do with what is the music. I was going to say product. I think product is the right word, actually. What is the product that you've produced? It's, it's the fruits of your labor. And how does it affect people? Does it tick their boxes? Does it satisfy their values? Because if you don't satisfy enough of people's values, they're not interested. And those values change over time. But if you do satisfy their values, they don't care who you are. They don't care what you look like. They don't care what part of the world you're from, what language you speak. Hello, Bailey DMB. Multiple errors says true. Someone's dissing a synth legend, saying he makes dross now. Well, a valid opinion, perhaps. Someone else says, I'm at my most efficient when I just have a basic synth and DAW. The keyboard synth makes a big difference. All mouse is not fun. I see that. Somebody else says, I'm in that situation you described, you were in. If it's not gear, it's not grinding. What is it? I'm going to tell you. We're getting there. Phil Adams says decision fatigue. You need flow. Yeah, obviously that's referring to having too many options, and I agree. So the answer isn't practice, right? Because if you practice bad processes, all you're doing is reinforcing bad habits. And you can try to search online for the best methods, but that's not particularly. They say that all the information you could ever want is online. Let me tell you, first of all, it's not, okay? Because I guarantee you, I figured things out that I've never seen anybody talk about, and I've searched hard to try and find somebody else who understands the avenue of exploration that I've gone down in my own personal endeavors to learn new things. And there's not a trace of anywhere. So that information just isn't there. And I search deep, if you know what I mean. I know how to search deep to find the right people who would be talking about those things, and they're not. So the information isn't always there. If you have very basic, obvious questions, then sure. The information that you usually see, information to supposedly help you make music, is either too vague, like put a compressor on your vocals, or it's oddly specific, like here's the exact knob positions to make this one bass sound on this one synth. There you go. It's like, that doesn't teach you anything. That person might as well have given you the preset. In fact, that makes me laugh. When you see the tutorial, it's like, yeah, here's the tutorial with a free preset for you to download. So they get people to watch the tutorial where they don't explain how they made the sound or the thought process. They just say, yeah, this goes to here and this goes to there, and here's the preset. There's no tutorial information there. There's no learning there. There's no benefit to that. I mean, not all tutorials are like that. Don't get me wrong. There's better than that, but a lot are that, and shouldn't be, but they are. What they hardly ever offer is a thought process behind each stage, because there's this culture of putting tools over skills. If you ask somebody, how did you get such and such effect, or how did you get such and such feeling, oftentimes their answer will be, I used a such and such product by such and such company. But again, that's not really, that's not what you asked. If you're asking how did you do it and they tell you what they use, that's like, I could ask my wife, how did you cut that mango? I used the knife. Well, yeah, I know you used the knife, but trust me, you give me that knife and that mango, I can't get it to do what you do. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's not the tool. The tool is not the skill. The tool is not the method. Okay, let me go back to the chat. Yes, multiple errors. You are absolutely correct. He made the point that there's a famous preset on a famous synth that there was nothing about it anywhere online at one point. That's true. I'd looked into that. That was one thing where there was a huge hole. Like, there's no information about it. We've got Chris Smart says there's a great 1-hour video of a very famous D&B producer who spends a lot of time being super vague about his specific processes. Yeah. I think, by the way, this is why my YouTube videos, the tutorials, have been the most popular ones. What I mean by that is, so I have, there was a period of time where I was putting out regular YouTube videos, and I put out about 20 videos-ish in that period. And I didn't know which ones were going to be popular. In fact, I didn't think any of them were going to get picked up, because I didn't like push them or anything. So it was just people found them somehow. And I was a little bit surprised, I mean, not shocked, but just I didn't know what to expect. But I was a little bit surprised at the popularity of the Hoover tutorial and the Respace tutorial. But I know why they're popular. They're popular for the same reason that I felt that they needed to be created. They're popular, and I know this because I've seen in the comments. Well, they're popular because I start the tutorial by naming the sound, playing the result, the final result that we're going to have, giving a little bit of background information on what the sound is, the significance of the sound, and then jumping straight into how to do it and why. Every step, what it should sound like, what you need to do in order to move on to before you progress to the following step. But what do you typically see on YouTube? The YouTubers, they don't want you to know what the end result sounds like at the start of the video, because they know, a lot of them, this is not for all of them, obviously, but a lot of them know if they play you the sound that they're going to end up with at the end of the tutorial, at the start of the video, people are going to click on the video, hear the sound, and then click off the video. And they don't want that. They want you to engage with the video. The other thing that is I've noticed is that, actually, I'm not going to talk about that. Sometimes I get a bit ahead of myself. Sometimes I get a bit ahead of myself. Let me think before I talk. Okay. Then there's schools and courses, but they only offer vague skills. What do I mean by that? How to use EQ, mixing and mastering. They never actually say, we're going to teach you how to, they don't say juicy stuff like, we're going to teach you how to do, I don't know. Somebody name something, or maybe I should read it in the comments. What would be something really juicy that you would want to learn? Because no, who's asking, I want to learn EQ? Give me a break. You can learn EQ on Wikipedia. You don't need a course to learn EQ. Just, I mean, the basics. Obviously, advanced use of EQ is kind of something else. It's like you're not really learning EQ at that stage. You're learning mixing, or you're learning restoration. Do you get what I'm saying? There's like a purpose to the EQ, because the EQ is a tool. See what I'm trying to say? It's a bit like if you're going to fencing lessons, you're no longer learning about, do they call it a sword, the blade in fencing? I don't know, it's not my field. You're no longer learning how to use the sword. You're learning fencing. Oh my gosh, I'm losing it. Right, let me look in the chat. How to make big spacey dub sounds. Bailey says, I'm on a uni course at the moment. This is very true. I expect a lot from uni and haven't really gained much at all. I don't know why you expected a lot. I don't know why you expected a lot. They don't promise much. They don't even promise much. In my opinion, what they're promising is really kind of limp. They'll say, we'll teach you how to use this, and we'll teach you the essential skills you need to work in the industry. They say really vague stuff that really isn't very juicy and really isn't exciting. Arps is saying, YouTubers do this thing where they say they know the secret and will reveal it later. Yeah, that's what I do. That's what I do a lot. That's what I've done today. But I am going to reveal things. Patience, my friend. Okay, 303 Cerebral says, how to make a kick really hit hard. They will never say that. They will never say, part of this course, we're going to teach you how to make a kick hit really hard, because they know they can't. They know they can't help you with that. They can't get you to that level. They might say, we'll help you mix your drums. You know, still what I'm trying to say. You see the distinction there. If you say, I want my kick to bang as hard as the hardest kicks in whatever the genre is that you're into, hard trance or whatever, they're never gonna agree to that, because they can't transfer those skills. Or if they do agree to it, they're gonna fall short, typically. Scales and melodic flows and progressions. That's interesting, Phil Adams. Oh, that's interesting, Phil Adams. You're putting my mind off on a different tangent. I really like that, though. I'll tell you what the essence of what I'm getting at here. Those schools and courses, they will never promise to teach you to get competitive results. They'll teach you how to get professional results, maybe, or adequate results, but they won't teach you how to get competitive results, because they can't. And I'm about to explain why they can't as well. It's all linked. All of this stuff is linked. Because I tried all of those things, by the way. I went to seminars. I've read books. In fact, books was another good source of information for me, I would say. But I mean, there's only so much you can pick up from a book, because it's just words on a page. Do you see what I mean? You have to take that information and actually go and do something with it. Sanction. Hiya, love, here for the knowledge bombs. Yes, mates. Good to see you. So I'm here to talk about my private membership idea. And a few people have said, well, why do we need your private membership, Owen? It's not many people have said this, but a few people have said it. Why do we need your private membership service, Owen, when there is courses and communities and whatnot already out there? There's Discord servers, there's all kinds of membership things. And My answer is those things aren't like what the premise of those things isn't even what I'm talking about. The point of those things isn't even what I'm talking about. So here's what's different about my idea, and it's just an idea at this stage still, a private membership service. The difference between my idea and their idea all comes down to this concept of meta. I mentioned this in last night's stream. Meta, META. It stands for the most effective tactic available. Most effective tactic available. META, meta. And I'll give you an example of what a meta is. I learned this from a friend who's into esports and gaming. And he says that highly competitive gamers, they are all interested in finding the meta, the most effective tactic available. When somebody has the meta, which is the most tactic, the most, I'm just going to say meta from now on. When somebody has the meta, they're going to win because their tactic is more effective than the average tactic. And so what happens is when that person is noticed, other people will then study that tactic, and then they've also learned the meta, and that becomes the new normal for that highly competitive gaming space. It's not just for esports and gaming and things. I think this applies to like I used to argue with a friend about eBay because in my opinion, the way to do eBay is to be a sniper, which means you wait until the very last moment. That is the most effective method. So you're not putting in bids that somebody else can see and then they're going to bid up. You just wait until the very last moment, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. If you can manage it, get your bid in. That's the most effective tactic available for eBay. I also saw a clip about, I think it was a podcast, a couple of meatheads talking about mixed martial arts. I think it was mixed martial arts or UFC, where they said that there was this guy, I don't even know his name, it's really not my field, but there was this guy who kind of came in and he was just beating the hell out of everybody. And it was because he had learned this particular style of fighting, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, that was more effective. It was the most effective style against all the other mixed martial arts styles. So what I'm saying is, this is the concept that I applied to not only my learning, but the music production itself. So when someone comes with a new meta, they change the game. Where do metas come from? They come from diverse fields. So for example, if you're making one particular genre of music, and let's say it's a style that has a 4-to-the-floor kick drum, you might learn techniques for mixing or producing those kick drums from another genre, a totally different genre that also uses 4-to-the-floor kick drums. Or you could be producing a style that doesn't even use 4-to-the-floor kick drums, but you're going to take some learning from that. You might even incorporate the 4-to-the-floor kick drums because that is a more effective tactic for, I don't know, the mix or the sound design or making people dance. I mean, there's different reasons why there's different sort of fields where the meta might be useful. But I seek the meta for everything. For big pieces, so composition, I want the meta for composition. Songwriting, I want the meta for songwriting. Performance, as in playing instruments into the recording. MIDI programming, production, sound design, mix down, mastering, and every single subcomponent of those overall pieces. So for example, MIDI programming, there's controller data, there's techniques you can do with overlapping notes, and there's things you can do with note lengths, there's things you can do with velocity, there's things you can do with specific controllers that have special purposes. I want the meta for each of those things. What's the meta for getting the exact right MIDI note lengths and the right velocities? I say right, and again, I refer back to the start of the stream where I talked about everybody having their own. Yeah, thank you guys. Meta is the most effective tactic available. I want the most effective tactic available at every step of the way. And once I've got it, I'm looking for the new most effective tactic available. Can we just read through the comments a little bit? Oh, Billy, hello. Lisi says, the weird thing about uni is they expect a lot of independent learning, which is okay, but no good if you don't know the questions to research. I also see the comment peer reviewed, but I don't know what that's in response to. But see, I'm inspired by the scientific method and how the global scientific community operates, which is that somebody comes with an idea via a white paper, this is how I understand it, in a journal. And once that idea is published, it's out to the rest of the scientific community, the rest of the world, to either incorporate that into their work or to contest it, to try and disprove it, to try and falsify it. I'm not sure if I'm using the right terms actually, but you get the idea. I think that process is the meta for discovery and learning new methods. And I suppose, I mean, even that's an overarching structure. Even on a smaller scale, there might be a meta for studying genetic or whatever, I'm not going to go too deep on that tangent. So this is the idea of why I want to set up a private membership service. It's because I'm very, very deep into looking for the meta for each aspect of music production. And part of that for me is keeping tabs on as many genres as I possibly can and trying to see if there's something I can learn. I also kind of watch the technology. As I say, I am more about techniques than tools. I put skills over tools all day long, but obviously you need tools as well. And you can get an edge from new technology. That can be a source of a meta. So the sources of metas could be different genres. It could be raw experimentation where you're just going to try stuff. Sometimes I try things I don't even think are going to work. Just because if it does work, holy moly, I might have made an amazing discovery. And I have made discoveries that way. I've thought things that end up being so simple. It's just like, surely if it was that simple, everybody would be doing it. I'm in that mindset where I'm skeptical, thinking, no way, it couldn't be that simple. And then you try it and it works. You think, why isn't everyone else doing it this way? And I know why everyone else isn't doing it that way. They're not interested in the meta. What is the meta anyway? I defined that in the stream last night, but basically, you want the most effective method. How could I phrase this? You want the best way to get the best result. Let me think about this. You want the best method to produce the best sound. But what we're calling best sound is a personal choice. And it might change from track to track. So don't think I'm trying to dictate to you, this is how you make the best bass sound. This is how you make the best snare sound. It's not about that. In fact, for me, what I've found has worked as an engineer is what I would define as the best in my role is the most flexible and adaptable techniques. So for example, if I have a kick drum technique and it works brilliant for, I don't know, drum and bass, I want that kick drum technique to also work for house. That's how I know it's a really good technique. If it works really well for both, if it's easy to do and get me the best results for both, I know that's a strong technique. And this is part of the reason why I like playing with lots of different genres and exploring lots of different genres. Sanction says, most things usually are that simple. I always tell people making music is easy, but getting to that point / mindset is hard. Yeah, my thing that I say is that making music is easy. It should be easy. And people don't want to hear that because they're like, I've been struggling. How dare you say it's easy? You just must be talented. Go away. Leave us alone. Don't put that in our face. I'm not talented. Here's the thing. It's difficult to learn. It's not difficult to do it. Once you've learned it, it's easy to do. That's the trick. This is why you get the kids on laptops and headphones beating the guys with all the kit, because they have a better method. They've got a better meta. They've got the meta, which is the most effective tactic available, at least a better tactic than what you have. So they don't even need better tools. If you have worse tools and a better method, you're going to win. If you have a bad method and the best tools, you're going to lose. So again, I'll put that back to the boxing analogy. If you have the best boxing gloves in the world, but you can't throw a punch to save your life, you're not going to do well against the guy with, you know, the perfect boxing technique or the best boxing technique, the meta of boxing, who doesn't have his favorite gloves this week. You know, good luck. You're going down. So that's my focus. And that's what this membership idea is all about. That's what I think I haven't conveyed clearly up until now. What would that look like? I'm still a bit unclear because, as I say, I haven't chosen the platform. People keep suggesting platforms to me, but what the platforms that people are suggesting to me are like popular, well-known platforms that everybody knows from sort of social media and that kind of thing. But the kind of platforms that I've been looking at are much lesser known, but much more specifically built for this kind of thing. So what I envision is like a membership area where you, but the focus is on progress for the individual. So you would have milestones that you want to meet. Chris Smout said about not being able to finish any music. What are the processes involved in finishing music? I would look at that, you know, diagnostically. Is it a creativity issue? Are you struggling to come up with the ideas? Is it perhaps something to do with the arrangement of those ideas? Are you generating plenty of ideas and then struggling to string those into a piece of music? Or is it a production issue? So you've got the music, you've got the arrangement, and you can't make it sound good. Or is it a mix issue? Like you've done the production and you're convinced that you've got all the right sounds and you've got the composition just how you want it, and you can't get it to sound as good as something else. For each of those steps, there's a meta. Mind blown moment, says Chris Smout. I think it's chaining the ideas into a decent arrangement. Well, there's metas for that, my friend. There's proven, tested ways of getting that to work. And again, we can break that down even further, because even if someone tells you how they do it, like gives you the overarching, the map for what they would do in order to chain all their ideas into an arrangement, you might come up with challenges that you weren't expecting. You might struggle still. And it could be for a whole heap of different reasons, because there are many steps to getting any of these jobs done. I want the meta for every step. And you can get really granular with that. Like, what's the meta for producing a pad sound to go in a breakdown? What's the meta for producing the low bass kind of pad, you know, like the deep part for a breakdown? And is that meta different for a high tempo track versus a low tempo track? And is there a technique that will cover both and would even stomach a tempo change or something? Do you get what I'm saying? So for me, it's about finding the techniques that are flexible and adaptable. And sometimes that means you need like a box of tricks. You see what I mean? You need a collection of approaches. One question that I get asked a lot, or the type of question that I get asked a lot, is how do you EQ your hi-hats? What kind of question is that? To me, that question doesn't even make sense, because first of all, what is a hi-hat? I mean, if we're talking about 808 hi-hats, those are very different from live hi-hats, and those are different from, say, a 909 drum machine hi-hat. They're like different species of sound, if you see what I mean. They're you wouldn't treat them the same. And then it depends on the pattern. I mean, are we even talking closed hats or open hats? Those are very different things. They play very different roles and in different genres. Are we talking disco house? Are we talking hard style? Maybe it doesn't even need hi-hats. Are we talking drum and bass where there's very little space between the hits because the tempo is so fast? I don't have a one size fits all for that. And I think people try to ask those shortcut questions because they're hoping that I'm going to say, oh yeah, boost 10K. And that is the kind of answer that you will read online. Yeah, to EQ hi-hats, boost 10K. Great. Good job. Good luck using that in all cases. All hi-hat, any pattern, any genre, any mix. Doesn't matter what else you've got going on in the mix. You're going to boost 10K. Good luck. No, we need to be adaptable and we need to be flexible. So that's what the meta is for me for each individual component. And again, I would say that's for me, it's composition, it's songwriting, which is not my strongest area, like the lyrics and things. That's not my strongest point. My point is really, I'm very good with composition, like writing musical notes, chord progressions, arrangement, that kind of thing. Performance, like, you know, playing on the MIDI keyboard and things, there's some hacks for that. Like, for example, one meta for playing on the keyboard. I remember there was a track that I was producing a few years ago that was really difficult. I wanted this roll. In fact, I could do it now. I've got a keyboard. Let me see. I've got that pad sound still here. But that's not going to work. Let me reset the synth. So the sound I wanted was like a big one of those, but it needed to sound musical. And if you just do, it's like random notes, isn't it? So I realized one trick was to just use the black notes, because those black notes form the pentatonic scale. So with a little bit of knowledge, you figure out that there are easier ways to do these things. And if you use that pentatonic scale and then just transpose it to match the key of the track, and you don't even need to think in terms of what note is this and what key is that and how many semitones. You don't need to think about any of that. All you need to do is do this and then do the transpose afterwards and see, does it need to go higher or lower? Just try. One, is that better? One, is that better? One more, is that better? Until it fits. That's the one. Bang, got it. And then the next part of that is, once I realized what the transposition should be, I was trying different objects because my fingers were getting sore. And I was thinking, well, my hands were like red raw. Well, I was trying to get this thing in really fast. The track was like 162 beats per minute, and it was like really quick. Yeah, I can't remember what I did in the end. It was like I tried so many things I can't remember, but the main takeaway was to use the pentatonic scale, as Chris is saying, the black notes. And forehead, someone said, no, I used my elbow at one point. That might have been what I ended up doing. Oh dear, the camera's gone out of focus. Yo, I'm here. Hello. Right. I'm losing my focus here. Yeah, I probably use like a glove or a sleeve or something. But the point is, yeah, you got to find the most effective tactic available, because if you don't have an effective tactic, the amount of time you put into it, the amount of effort you put into it, the amount of will you have, you're not going to make it work. It's and the worst part of that is that you try harder and harder and longer, and you try again, and you try things like so let's just say you're doing a sound design thing and you haven't quite got the sound that you want. What a lot of people do, they haven't got the meta, and they also haven't admitted that to themselves. They haven't admitted that the sound that they've produced is like pretty much wrong. but they're going to go in with EQ and automation. They're adding layers of complexity. Complexity is not the way. That's something I've learned. That's something that 30,000 hours will give you a perspective on. Complexity is bad. Okay, complexity is bad in a lot of ways. And obviously, I'm generalizing here. This is a principle. It doesn't mean there's no exceptions, but generally, the simplest, cleanest, clearest way to do something is the most practical way, and will get you the best sound. Generally, like I'll give you an example. Yeah, when I realized this early on. Let me be clear. I didn't realize this early on, but early on into my realization, one thing I was doing is I would have a plugin, like the channel strip, the plugin list. What would you call it? The insert rack, chock full of different plugins. So I've got like a dynamic EQ, and then I've got a compressor, and then I've got another dynamic EQ, and then I've got a saturation, then I've got a limiter, and then I've got a reverb, and then I've got like a special whatever. I've got all these different effects stacked one after the other, and I'm listening to the sound thinking, it's a little bit harsh. Maybe I should add another EQ. And I add the EQ, I think, it's a little bit quiet. Maybe I should add a limiter. Then I add a limiter. I think, it's a little bit dry. Maybe I should add another reverb. And so you're stacking and stacking and stacking and stacking. And what ends up happening is you're getting a buildup of artifacts from each stage of processing. And I have to be very clear here. Not all processing results in artifacts. Not all plugins result in unwanted artifacts. In fact, sometimes they result in purely positive things. That is possible. However, generally, the fewer steps you take, the better the sound is going to be. And what I would do at that stage is I would render the version that I had, and then I would blank out the track. So I'd render a copy, and then I would blank out the track, the insert slots, and then I would try to get the same sound with as few plugins as possible. And what I found that really shocked me, I was like, no way, this can't be happening. Every single time I did that, I got a better sound. Easily got a better sound. And I think the answer for why is because when I was stacking one plugin after the other, one after the other, one after the other, I was letting the process get out of control. But what I was doing is I was getting closer and closer to the sound I wanted as I was realizing the definition of what it was I wanted. Do I want more mid-range here? Do I want more punch here? And once I had that definition, like an idea, a goal to strive for, doing it with fewer effects was a cleaner method that was not only easier, but sounded better. And that is the idea of a meta for me in any part of the process. We're looking for the easiest way to get the best sound. And you also got to think about workflow. So for example, if your workflow involves taking steps that make it difficult to work backwards, what do I mean by working backwards? So if you're going to produce a synth sound in a synth and then chuck that synth sound in a sampler, you're going to sample it and stick it in the sampler. And then you're later going to decide, oh, I'm not happy with that synth sound now. I want to change the detune amount. Well, you can't change the detune amount once it's a sample. What are you going to do? You can't. You're going to have to go back to the synth and change the detune and record it again. But if you've deleted that synth, or if it was an analog synth, a hardware synth or something, you didn't save the preset, that's not good workflow. That's awful workflow. At the very least, you could have taken a picture of the synth before you rendered it so that you could reconstruct it. That would be smart workflow. So I'm looking for the most practical way to get the best sound. It's not about adding more steps. It's about removing. It's not about doing more advanced techniques that take longer. Simpler techniques, easier techniques that are more effective. That's what the meta is in the realm of music production. It's about finding the easiest and most effective methods to get the best sound as you defined easiest, as you defined effective, as you define best. It has to be what works for you personally for that genre. You get what I'm saying? Like, you have your own list of requirements, and you need to make sure that you're ticking all of those boxes, your values, your your values. So there's a lot going on in the chat. I'm talking and talking and yapping and yapping. I'm scrolling up. Wow, I need to scroll a lot. There's a lot of comments. Okay. Yeah, Thomas Adair, like Sanction's comment, echoing what I said about simplicity. Simplicity is elegance, my friends. In fact, talking about learning from another field, one of my inspirations was Steve Jobs, because he talked about that as well, simplicity and elegance. He wants simple solutions that like, he wouldn't want a Mac computer that looks ugly on the inside with cables all over the place. He'd want it to all look neat and tidy, and that is kind of practical as well, because you can see what's what. It's clear. It's easy to manage in so many ways. Okay, that's not the best example, but whatever. It's an example. When you know how it is easy, says Strongcraft. Yeah, right. That's exactly what this is. That's exactly what this is. That's my whole idea of having the membership group, so that we discuss what those ideas are. We want the easiest, I suppose, most cutting edge methods to make your music as powerful and effective as it can possibly be. You want the best sound with the least amount of effort, really. You want it to require the least amount of skill. That in itself is a skill, I suppose, but I mean, that's the skill you want, isn't it? You want the skill to be able to find a method that's going to work without the difficulty. You don't want a technique that's going to require you to be able to predict things. You want a technique where you can audition what you're doing in place or in context. So that's an example. So, this is a common one, actually. This is actually a piece of wisdom that gets spread and is true. So people say you shouldn't solo sounds in your mix to EQ them. And that is a common piece of advice that is actually true. I mean, a lot of the common advice is garbage, but that one is true. And the reason for that is because the EQ moves are meaningless without the context of everything else that the sound that you're EQing is sitting with. Totally meaningless. There's no way you can set that EQ. You're playing the game of pin the tail on the donkey if you can't hear the other sounds in the mix. So that is the effective way to do that. But funny enough, that same principle should apply to like every part of the process, but I don't hear that being said about every part of the process. There are many parts of the process where the common advice is to do all this convoluted, difficult stuff where it's like you're putting yourself at a huge disadvantage, where the process is overcomplicated and your chances of success are really low. Okay. Let me read. Ian Cole, which plugins could you not do without given your established workflow? There are no plugins. There are no plugins I could not do without. I could produce with no plugins at all, given my established workflow. I don't like reliance on tools. I'm against over reliance on tools. I love tools. Don't get me wrong. I have plenty of plugins. I have lots of plugins installed, and I use them. I don't keep plugins installed that I don't use. So I do use a lot of plugins. Do not get me wrong. I'm not anti-plugins. I'm not anti-kit. But I'm pro skill. I'm skill over kit. That's really, really important. But to be super pedantic, don't need any plugins. I mean, you can make music just with samples. Just sequence the samples. You don't need a reverb for that. You don't need an EQ for that. Because you could be very clever about how you combine samples, change the levels of those samples. You could be very clever about how you voice chords and how you arrange the notes. Because an orchestra, there's no EQ, there's no compression. They don't have plugins when an orchestra plays live. You just have sounds that work together, arranged in a way that works together. That should be the goal. So yeah, what could I not do without? There's none I could. There's no plugin that qualifies that. Old Lost says Fanu has a great pay-for-learning service, might be similar to what you're proposing. Oh, yeah, I love Fanu. It's different. I'll tell you why it's different. I love Fanu, but this is different. This is very different. What I envision is mainly going to be based on regular group coaching calls. So it would mean I would be leading, like we'd have one particular topic that we'd talk about. That's how I see it. But that's one, those kinds of fine details I'm not 100% sure on. But we could have a group coaching. We could have a group coaching call where we all discuss the meta for whatever it is that somebody has an issue with. See, I don't mind talking about things that I was going to say that I've already figured out, because there's no end to it. If I feel that I have the meta for, I don't know, designing hi-hats for trap music, I would benefit from discussing that with other people who have other techniques, because I'm going to be thinking, what are the benefits to their way that I might be missing out on, and how might I be able to adjust what I'm doing in order to incorporate those benefits? You see what I'm saying? That's how you find the new meta and the new meta, and that's my pursuit. That's what I'm after. Okay, so in my membership group, there would be regular group coaching calls, which are the quest for the metas, right? It's what it's all about, the metas. There's also exclusive training materials. So, for example, I'm working on 2 courses at the moment. They're both mixed down courses, I suppose, but one is focused on clarity and loudness, which I know loudness is a controversial topic, but it's mainly clarity. And the other one is focused on stereo, getting the perfect stereo image and the depth and the space and all of that stuff. And those are based on metas. Again, you wouldn't find training materials based on metas out there, because what you're getting is use an EQ, high frequencies sound bright and present. You're getting this vague, fluffy. They're very under ambitious, in my opinion. I'm about competitive edge. I'm about striving for extremely effective results. That's what I'm about. And my focus is on helping each member in the group hit every milestone via the metas in order to achieve that. So, for example, let's say that you come into the group and we're in the group coaching call and we're talking about, I don't know, whatever it is that you're having a trouble with. I would suggest to you some models that I know to have worked for me and for other people that perhaps I've trained or I've worked with in the past. And then as a group, we would discuss that and we would see what challenges you specifically had with that. Because on the group coaching calls, we could have hot seats. And then you would go and test that and report back to us. That's why I liken it to the scientific method, where it's comparing notes. You see what I'm saying? That's how you find metas, and that's how you confirm that the technique that you have is the most effective tactic available. Also, though, inside my thing, there would be free discussion. So you'd be able to pose a question to the entire group, or, start a discussion. And we could have spontaneous video calls as well, because See, the thing is, if I do go ahead with this, if I do set this membership site up, I will be waking up every morning thinking, how can I serve these people? How can I help them? What can I do today to make this work for them, and to give them progress and help them find the best methods for the things that they're struggling with? Because if I didn't do that, then you probably wouldn't want to stay, and the whole thing would fall apart. It wouldn't take long. Imagine if you're there 2-3 months and you're not seeing any progress, and you're thinking, oh, it's just talking about the same old EQ stuff that you could learn in any old course or Patreon thing. What's the point? I wouldn't. That would. It's totally not about that. It's not about the same information that you've already seen. This is about taking the art of music production and the art of learning music production and everything that entails, composition and all the rest of it, and turning it into an extreme competitive sport. But we're not competing. We're competing like a team together to find the best methods that we can and compare notes. That's the whole idea about it. That's why it's different. Let me look in the comments. I'm going to drink, actually. I'm going to switch off the mic for a moment while I read comments and drink. Multiple errors says, I think for me it's a race to get the majority of the tune down before you burn out and lose interest. Yeah, but you know what? I've heard people say that I would have to ask diagnostic questions there, because it's not clear to me, and don't take this the wrong way, I don't know you and I don't know your music, but it's not clear to me that the track was even worth the interest in the first place. Because there's two issues that can be happening there. I see that some people, they start working on a track and they're really into it when they start, and they go back to it the next day and they're not feeling it anymore. But the reason is because the ideas aren't that great. They lost their perspective early on, and they put down some ideas that weren't really satisfying their values. And then when they later realize that those ideas aren't satisfying their values, they don't have the motivation to finish. But it's not a motivation issue. It's not a workflow issue related to the speed. It's really, in those cases, it's about how do you produce the ideas that demand being finished, that warrant being finished. I'm not saying that's the case in your example, but I have seen that a lot. And nobody talks about it because people are afraid to talk about that. I'm not. I'm not. Or it might be a case of when you've identified, right, it is important to get ideas down before you burn out and lose interest. I mean, it's important to work at high speed. There are many advantages to working at high speed for various stages in the process. So what you need is the most effective tactic available for all the sub jobs that go into getting your ideas down. Like some people will write ideas down on a piece of paper before they go to produce, so they can use that paper as the sort of blueprint for what they're going to do, which might sound nuts to you. It sounded nuts to me at first, but I've seen that work. So that is a method. I suppose I'd have to explain how that can work, but it can. Other people like record voice notes and things. Some people expect that to work better than it does, and it doesn't, so there's metas for the individual steps within that. Blah, 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 blah. Gonna go through. So Ian Cole asked, which mic and which mic preamp are you using for this right now? Why does my voice sound good or bad? I'm using Shure SM7B. It's really Shure SM7B is like the most bait mic. Everybody uses it. It's the most boring microphone in the world, and that's going into a DBX 286S microphone preamplifier. Blah, blah. Have you tried out Futura VST? Not yet. I saw your comment on my YouTube video. I will check it out. We says, when I do my sounds, they're so simple. If I want more complex sounds, I use presets or adjust or work backwards. Interesting. Yeah, but there's solutions to those problems. There's solutions to those issues. Just because a sound sounds complex, it doesn't mean that it requires a complex process to make it. That's really important to understand. In fact, one thing that I've seen that happens a lot, and it happened to me, is people equate the feeling and the enjoyment that they get from music with the effort that must have gone into it, or the time that must have gone into it, or the complexity that must have gone into it. That's wrong. It's logical. It sounds sensible, but it's wrong in the sense that very, very often the things that we strive to produce that would be best be done with simplicity. I'm thinking about examples for that. So if you looked at the sound design tutorials on my channel, I generally take that kind of an approach of, I'm not going to be stacking on loads and loads of effects. That one thing that bugs me about sound design tutorials that I've seen, a lot of them, they get a sound that's like 60% of the way there, 70% of the way there, 80% of the way there. And then they think, well, now we'll just pile on loads of effects to make it sound better. Nah, that's not the one. That's not the one. You have the sound. You haven't produced the sound. You've produced something that's kind of like it. Now you're going to pretend it is by adding effects. But it's bad workflow to do it that way often. Not always, but often. Something else as well, and this is to do with Mesa for making music, the most effective tactic available. One of the worst things that you can do, that a lot of people do, is what I call buck passing. So buck passing is when you're working on one step of the process and you haven't got a pleasing result, but you think, that's okay, I'm going to address that at the next step. You've passed the buck, and then you're still not satisfied with what's going on at that stage. You think, that's okay, I'm going to adjust that at the next step and the next step, and you go on like that. And the reason that doesn't work is because you basically have a bad composition, poorly produced, poorly mixed, and by that point you're out of options. It's the mastering engineer's job. Fix this. Well, they can't. Even if the mastering engineer could fix your mix can't fix your bad production, and your bad production can't fix your bad composition. The solution to the biggest mastering problems are usually way up the chain. The best solution. So, if you've got a track to be mastered and the bass doesn't work in the track, I see like mastering tutorials where they talk about fixing the bass. Are you nuts? Why would you need to fix the bass in mastering? It's always easier. It's always better to do that earlier on in the process. It's always better to do it in the mix. If it's not right in the mix, then it should have been right before the mix. Really, hopefully, it should have been done. Someone wrote, when the meta is a ghost producer. Let me think about that. Come on, Billy. Billy says it depends, Owen. No, fixing things upstream is a generalization. It's a general good practice. It's generally better to get things right earlier on in the process because it's more flexible. He says sometimes it's harder to think of the whole mix down. I don't really know what you mean by that. We'll go back into the comments. It's ideal, but not always the easiest. No, you're wrong. Sorry, I'm just going to say flat wrong on that one. Let me explain why. If you can fix things upstream and you know how to do that effectively with the most effective tactic available, it is always the easiest. Otherwise, there's no point. That is my point. So, for example, let's say you have a pad sound and you want to give it a sense of space. Now, let's say that the pad sound just ends dead, like the release just goes, eek, and it stops. Well, one step that you can take is to lengthen the release. So it goes, so it smoothly fades off, okay? That doesn't mean that you can't then put reverb and delay or something onto it afterwards. It just means that it's better to have had the long release before you bring in the reverb. Do you see what I'm saying? Maybe that's too specific an example. But what I'm saying there is the better you do each step, the easier it is to do the next step. That's like a set in stone rule. You don't have to do any of the steps perfectly. You don't have to do, there's not one step you need to do perfectly. They can all be imperfect and you can produce an amazing product. I'll say product. But what really does not work is to have bad composition followed by bad production, followed by bad mix down, and hope that the mastering is going to fix it. And that is like bad composition, hope that can be solved with the production. Bad production, hope that can be solved with the mix down. Bad mix down, hope that can be solved with the mastering. No. That's a bad process, a really bad process. You're going to drive yourself nuts. Trust me, I've done it. What works better is when you have a really strong composition, makes the production easy. And because the production is easy, you're going to do a better job of it. And you're going to enhance an already good composition with a good production. And then guess what? The mix is easy because you already have a really good production. It doesn't need much mix work. But then you're not using the mix to fix the production. You're using the mix to enhance the production. That's when mixing becomes fun and easy. This is what Sanction said. It should be fun and easy, which is right. So if you have an easy mix down because you have a good production, then you might not even need mastering. Imagine that. Imagine your mix sounds so good, you don't even need to do anything in mastering. That happens. Read any mastering book, and they tell you early on in the books, often, all the books from the greats, I'm not going to name any names, but they'll tell you, ideally, you don't want to do anything to the master. That's a story for another time. Anyway, I hope I have cleared up what my concept is about. So it's just an idea at the moment. I don't have it all figured out. It's a rough idea. And obviously I haven't created anything yet, but the idea is a group that focuses on finding the metas, the most effective tactic available for every step in the process. So I'm about to wrap up the stream, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm looking for people to opt in to, what would I say, to be founding members. And so what I would do for that, because I'd like to get started with this sooner rather than later. And because I don't have anything like set up yet, I just have ideas. Like I have some ideas of what platforms I could use. I have some ideas of what it could look like. What I'm hoping to do is invite a few people to be founding members, and for those people to help me to build it out and help me decide, how regularly should the coaching calls be? What times of the day should those coaching calls be? How should we host the replay for those coaching calls? So that those founding members will help me to build it out so that it can be launched to the general public, at which point I would raise the price. So what I'm saying is I would like to extend to anyone here today an offer, if you are willing to opt in, of a founding member's price, we'll call it, meaning that you would have that price, it would be a subscription price, but I don't even have the subscription system set up yet. But what I would ask you to do in order to take part in this is to email me. So I need you to email me. I'll put my email in the chat. In fact, I'll pin it. It's a very specific email address that I want you to use. not the normal one that I mail out from. This is the email address that I've put in the chat. I'm not going to say it out loud. It's in the chat and it's pinned. If you can email me to say that you're interested, I will send you instructions on how to become a founding member. And hopefully, if there's enough interest, and I am going to send an email about this as well, but if there's enough interest by Monday, I will make a decision. So I think what I'm going to do, I will send instructions, and that will be for making a payment that can be refunded, so that if I decide not to go ahead with it, I'll just get all the payments refunded quickly. And Chris Mout says totally down, but only if you call it Owenly fans. Yeah, my wife wouldn't be too happy with that. One sec. Yeah, so as I say, I don't have everything figured out. It's just an idea. I haven't created the membership yet, but if it's something you'd like to help create with me as a founding member, this is my offer. It's a special price, which I'll send the details of that, but I want you to email me first so I can see how many people are interested. And then when it launches to the public, I'll raise the price. However, because you joined as a founding member, you'll forever be locked in at the lower founding member price. So this is going to be, even when other people are paying more, you're still going to be paying the low founding member price as long as you remain a member in good standing. But what I ask for in return for the lower price is that as a founding member, you're going to give me feedback and speak into helping me to shape this idea and what this membership site will become. Because as I said, right now, it's just a rough idea. It's rough around the edges. There are lots of details that I haven't made decisions on, and I could do with some help from people who would actually be participants to actually give me the feedback on what that should look like and how it should be delivered. How can I serve you? How can I make this work for you? You know what I'm saying? How can I satisfy you? Don't tell my wife I said that. Yeah, how can I best serve you? That's what I want to know. And so it might be a case that we do votes and that kind of thing. But what I'll say, if you want to skip years of dissatisfaction, and if you want access to the easiest, most cutting edge methods to make your music as powerful and as effective as it can possibly be, and whiz past the competition, then send me that email. And I'm going to stick to small numbers to begin with, because a large group size demands obviously more admin work for me. And that could mean some logistical challenges, because as I say, there's not, I don't have everything in place just yet. But I would say the first 5 people who sign up, I see 303 Cerebral says email sent. Chris Mout says email sent. Oh my gosh, we might be at 5 already. The first 5 people are going to get a little bonus, which is going to be special one-on-one time with me. Not Owenly fans. Don't get any funny ideas. I'm gonna basically give you a one-on-one kind of training call, I suppose, a one-on-one Q&A. So we will talk about your music and your challenges. So Chris, you said you've emailed, so we'll probably be talking about your issue not being able to finish tracks. Certainly have a lot of experience to help with that. So yeah, any questions? Any comments? M Stormcrust is sent. CG says sent mine too. Oh my gosh, I probably am at 5. I'm not looking at the email inbox at the moment. I might have to increase that, but let's see. Bailey, peace out, Owen. Cool. Reading back on the comments. Yeah, one thing that I find interesting with the concept of meta, by the way, is sometimes I have an idea that I think, oh, the way this should be done, I like it to sound a certain way, but I might then push that to the group and say, look, guys, here's a proposal. I think, I don't know, hi-hats should be mixed this way. I like the way it sounds like this for this particular genre. What do you guys think? Do you think that there's room for improvement with this? Do you see what I'm saying? That kind of thing. Thomas Adair, Mr. Arthur says, I emailed too. Oh dear. M. Stromcraft says, could not be delivered. JR Music says, email sent. Lee C, thanks for the stream, Owen. It will be interesting exploring this whole thing. M. Stromcraft, whoa, mailbox unavailable. Let me just double check my email. See, well, I do see a bunch of emails in there. My goodness. I see Keith Franklin. I see someone called WS. I see Connor Grieve. Oh, do you know what? I probably shouldn't be reading these names out loud. It's like a, that's like a, what would you call it? That's like a privacy issue thing. I'm going to stop. Mailbox unavailable. I have received email, so it should work. If you can't get it through that email address, just reply to one of my other emails. If you know that the email hasn't got through, or you're concerned that the email hasn't got through, just use a different email address. With the put meta in the subject. If you're going to use a different email address, just put meta in the subject, and I will. I will know to put you on the list. The reason why I asked you to use that email address before is so that I can see the order that the emails came in a bit more easily. Oh dear. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up for the night then. Yeah, of course, it's fine to read out people's messages in the chat because the chat's public, everyone can see it, but I shouldn't be reading out the names in the, because when I suddenly realized actually some of these names aren't the people who are in the chat, or might not be the people who are in the chat. I don't recognize the names, and I thought, oh yeah, it's a bad idea. Didn't really think that one through. Is what I mean. Sometimes I talk before I think. Cool. All right. Yeah, I'm just gonna wrap it up there then. If you have further thoughts, comments, questions, actually, I suppose the best place to put them would be in the comments on this video. So when I end the stream in a moment, it will say, the video will go into my library. So if you go to the channel, the Owen Palmer channel on YouTube, and then click on videos and go to live, I think that's how that works. Then this will come up and it will have the same 30,000 hours with the clock. That's the thumbnail. All right, I'm out. I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed. So thanks for joining me, and let's see what the next step is.